I received a letter from my past self, but it was written after I was born. It started like any normal day, but when I checked my mailbox, there was a letter addressed to me, written in my own handwriting. At first, I thought it was some kind of prank or a bizarre mistake, but when I looked closer, I realized something chilling. The letter was written 10 years before I was born. The handwriting was mine, but I hadn't written it yet. It described moments from my childhood that only I knew, things I had never shared with anyone. The worst part? The letter warned me about events in my future, things that hadn't happened yet. Now, I'm not sure if I'm being stalked by myself or if something much darker is at play. It started like any other morning. I was in the middle of unpacking boxes in my new apartment, trying to get everything settled after the chaos of the past few weeks. I had just moved to the city, far away from my hometown, and everything was still fresh, new, and unfamiliar. But amidst all the moving boxes and clutter, I found something that changed everything. There was a letter in my mailbox that morning, one I wasn't expecting. The envelope was made of thick aged paper, the kind that looked like it had been sitting around for decades. It was addressed to me, but it wasn't just any letter. The handwriting on the front was strange, my handwriting, but not exactly how I write now. It was more precise, more perfect. I had no idea who would send me something like this, especially given that I hadn't told anyone about my new address yet. It seemed odd, but I shrugged it off. I figured it was just some random piece of mail that I would throw away, like most of the junk I'd received so far. But then I looked at the date. It was dated June 18th, 1995, 10 years before I was even born. My heart skipped a beat. There was no way this letter could be for me, and there was no way I could have written it. I hadn't even existed yet. For a moment, I froze. I thought I was imagining things. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe it was just some kind of mistake. But something about the letter felt too real. I ripped the envelope open, my hands shaking. I pulled out the single sheet of paper, and on it, I saw my own handwriting, just as I had thought. But the words were chilling. "Hey, it's me. I'm writing this because you need to know what's coming. You've always wondered why you feel like someone's watching you. Well, the truth is someone is, and you'll have to face them soon. It's not too late, but you need to be careful. Don't trust anyone." I stared at the letter in disbelief. The handwriting was mine, but I hadn't written it. And the contents were even stranger. It wasn't just a letter to me. It was a message from someone who knew things about me that I hadn't even thought about. But it didn't stop there. The letter went on to predict future events that hadn't happened yet. It described things about me, things I hadn't even shared with anyone. "You'll meet someone important soon. They'll bring changes that you won't understand at first. Trust them, no matter what. The path you're walking has already been decided. Don't fight it." How could this be? How could this letter possibly know about my future? I had no answers, just more questions. At first, I thought it was all some kind of sick joke. There was no way this letter could be real, no way it could be possible. But the more I read it, the more unsettled I felt. The handwriting, my handwriting, looked too real, the words too specific. And the worst part? The letter wasn't just predicting my past. It was predicting my future, events that hadn't happened yet, things that I couldn't explain. But somehow, I knew were coming. The next few days felt like a blur. I couldn't focus on anything, and I kept coming back to the letter. I kept rereading it, obsessing over every detail, trying to understand how it was possible for me to have written something in 1995. The letter didn't just talk about random things. It spoke about specific incidents that I hadn't experienced yet, things that were going to happen soon. One of the first predictions started to come true just a few days later. The letter mentioned that I would meet someone who would play a pivotal role in my life. And sure enough, I did. I met Sarah at the coffee shop, just as the letter had said. She wasn't like anyone I had ever met before. There was something oddly familiar about her, as though we had crossed paths before, even though I was certain I hadn't. Her presence felt like déjà vu, like I was meant to meet her. We hit it off immediately. She was easy to talk to, and we spent hours discussing our lives. But then, she said something that made my blood run cold. "You've been feeling watched, haven't you?" Sarah said, looking directly into my eyes. I froze. I had never mentioned this to anyone, not even my closest friends. How could she know that? The letter had said exactly that. "You've always wondered why you feel like someone's watching you." I tried to shrug it off, attributing it to coincidence. But the words from the letter haunted me. What was going on? How was this possible? Was I being controlled by some unseen force? Was everything I was experiencing somehow written in stone? As the day wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah wasn't just a coincidence. She was the important person the letter had warned me about. But why? And what did that mean for me? Over the next few days, things took a strange turn. The letter's predictions kept coming true, and I couldn't help but feel like I was following a script. Every conversation, every interaction with Sarah felt predetermined, as though it had all been planned long before I had even met her. It wasn't just Sarah. The letter also described things that were happening in my life that I hadn't told anyone about. For example, it mentioned an opportunity at work, a new project I was about to take on. It even described the exact moment I would meet with my boss to discuss it. When it happened, it felt like I was living through a pre-written chapter in my life. But as I read the letter more, I began to realize that the predictions weren't just simple events. They were more complex than that. The letter began to hint at darker things I wasn't ready to face. One entry stood out in particular. You will soon have to make a decision, one that will define your future. It will be a choice between comfort and truth. Don't ignore the truth, no matter the consequences. What was the truth? And why was I being asked to choose between comfort and truth? I started to feel like I was losing control. Everything around me felt like it had already been planned, and I was just following the path laid out in front of me. But there was one thing I knew for certain. If I didn't make a choice soon, I'd be stuck living someone else's version of my life. The tension was mounting. The predictions from the letter had come true, and I couldn't ignore the fact that I was somehow being guided. Every step I took, every conversation I had, felt like it had been written in advance, and I had no control over it. But, as the letter had warned, I was now at a crossroads. The time had come for me to face the choice it spoke about, the choice between comfort and truth. For the first time, I questioned my every move. Should I continue living my life as I had been, comfortable in my routine, surrounded by people I trusted, or should I face the truth that was starting to make itself clear? The truth of the diary, the truth about my life, and the unsettling realization that nothing had been as it seemed. The next day I received another message from Sarah. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary at first, just a casual text asking how I was doing, checking in like we always did. But there was something about it that felt different, as if she was waiting for me to respond in a certain way. I know you've been feeling conflicted, the message read, but you have to make your decision soon. You can't hide from it forever. I stared at the text for a long time, unsure how to respond. Was she part of it? Was she guiding me toward the decision the letter had mentioned? Or was she just someone I was meant to trust, as the letter had told me? I knew that my next move would change everything. I could either trust Sarah, go with the flow of what the diary had predicted, or I could make my own decision, even if it meant breaking free from everything I knew. As the day wore on, I found myself drifting through my routine. I felt like I was stuck in a haze, unable to make a decision. But then, something happened that made me realize the truth I had been avoiding. I ran into a stranger on the street that afternoon. He was disheveled, looking lost, but he stopped me with a look in his eyes that sent a chill down my spine. "I know what you're going through," he said, his voice hoarse. "You have a choice to either follow the path or make your own. But remember, once you break free, you can't go back." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. The letter, Sarah, the stranger, it all suddenly made sense. There was a path that had been set for me, but I didn't have to follow it. I could choose to make my own path, but it would come with consequences. I had been given the choice, the ultimate decision. Would I follow the life laid out for me, or would I risk everything to create my own future? The more I thought about the stranger's words, the clearer things became. Sarah was not just a friend. She was part of the puzzle, part of a greater plan that had already been set in motion. She wasn't a random person I had met. She was the catalyst. She was the decision point, the choice that I had to make. But what if I had already made that decision by meeting her? Had everything been predetermined, or did I truly have the freedom to choose my own fate? I decided to confront her. I couldn't keep living in uncertainty, stuck between the past and the future. I needed answers. That night, I met Sarah at the bar we often visited. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was normal. I had to ask her, Sarah, I began, my voice shaking slightly. I need to know what's going on. I need to understand. Are you part of this? Are you part of the plan? The diary? Everything? Was it all planned for me? She didn't seem surprised. Her eyes softened as she took a deep breath. I knew you would ask eventually, she said, her voice calm but intense. I didn't want to tell you this. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this, but yes, I'm part of it. The letter wasn't just for you. It was for both of us. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. What does that mean? What do you mean it was for both of us? She looked down, avoiding my gaze for a moment, before looking up again. The future that you've been reading about, the events that the diary predicted, they're not just about you, they're about us. I've been watching you, waiting for you to figure it out. I'm here to make sure you don't make the wrong choice. I felt a chill run through me. Everything had felt off since I met her, but now it was all making sense. Sarah had been waiting for me, and the decision I made with her would change everything. But was I really making my own choice, or was I just following the path laid out for me by forces I couldn't understand? I didn't know what to think. Sarah had just confirmed the one thing I'd been avoiding. Everything was connected. The diary, the letter, my encounters with her, and now this truth. It was all part of a much larger plan. But the most terrifying thing was that I didn't know if I had control anymore. Why me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why am I the one who has to make this decision? Why was I chosen? Sarah's gaze softened, and she reached out to place a hand on my arm. You weren't chosen. You've always had the choice. You just didn't realize it until now. I shook my head. But how could I have a choice when everything in the diary has already come true? When the letter predicted everything I've done so far? The path has already been laid out for me, hasn't it? She hesitated, her eyes searching mine, almost as if she was looking for something. The path isn't set, not entirely. You think that everything is fixed, that the future is written in stone, but that's not true. Every decision you make now will determine how the future unfolds. What you choose to do now will change everything. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Was she right? Was I really in control? Or was I just a puppet being pulled along by some invisible strings? The more I thought about it, the more the weight of my decision pressed down on me. Sarah, she was both the key and the obstacle. If I chose to follow her, to follow the path that had been set for me, everything would be safe. But would I be living my life or someone else's? And if I chose to break away, what would happen? What if everything I had worked for, everything I had believed in, was taken away? The future loomed before me, full of endless possibilities, but none of them felt like they belonged to me. Sarah, I said, taking a deep breath, I need to know everything. If I'm going to make this decision, I can't keep feeling like I'm in the dark. What is this all really about? Why do I have to choose? She seemed to hesitate before answering, as though she knew she had to reveal something more. It's not just about you and me, and it's not just about the letter or the diary. It's about the consequences of choice. Everything you've done so far, everything that's happened, is part of a larger cycle, a cycle that's been repeated for generations. You and I are part of that cycle. I stared at her in disbelief. A cycle? What do you mean? The choices we make, the paths we walk, they repeat themselves over and over again. I'm here to help you make the right choice, the one that will break the cycle. If you don't, everything will keep happening again and nothing will change. But if you do, if you make the right choice, you can finally stop the cycle from continuing. You can take control of your future. Her words hit me like a thunderclap. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about breaking free from a cycle that had been going on for who knew how long. But how could I be sure that the choice I was about to make was the right one? I took another deep breath, trying to steady myself. I looked at Sarah, searching for any hint of doubt, but all I saw was determination. And then, the strangest thing happened. The letter appeared again. It wasn't the same one. It was a fresh letter, written in the same perfect handwriting. I stared at it in disbelief. How was this possible? How could the letter have come back? I opened it, hands trembling, and read the words. The choice is yours. Follow the path or create your own future. But know this, one choice will lead you to everything you've ever wanted. The other will break you beyond repair. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the words pressing down on me. The decision was mine. There was no going back. I had to make it. Now, I felt a strange calmness wash over me after reading the letter. It was as if a switch had been flipped in my brain. The uncertainty, the confusion, the weight of it all. It suddenly felt manageable, as if I had been given the clarity I so desperately needed. The choice was no longer a burden. It was an opportunity. But as I stood there, staring at the words in front of me, the questions I had been avoiding for so long resurfaced. What if I was wrong? What if I was choosing the wrong path? I glanced at Sarah, who was waiting for me to make a decision. She didn't say anything, just stood there, watching me, as though she knew this was the moment I had been preparing for, the moment that would decide everything. "I know it's hard," Sarah said softly, breaking the silence, "but it's your future. You can make it whatever you want it to be." I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw her not as part of a predestined plan, but as someone I had chosen to trust. But was I really choosing, or was I just following the inevitable? Hadn't everything in the letter, everything I had experienced, been designed to push me toward this exact moment? The tension in my chest grew as I thought about my options. If I followed the path laid out for me, it would be easy. I would be able to live my life the way it was meant to be. No surprises, no challenges. The future would unfold just as it had been predicted. But if I chose to break free, what would that look like? Would I be able to create something entirely new? Or would I be doomed to failure? There was only one way to find out. I took a step towards Sarah. "I'm not following the path anymore," I said, my voice steady despite the fear that was bubbling up inside me. "I'm choosing my own future." Sarah's face softened, and she stepped closer. "Are you sure? There's no turning back once you make this choice." "I'm sure," I said, the decision finally feeling right. "I have to do this." I tore the letter into pieces and let the fragments fall to the floor. For the first time, I felt completely free. It was as if the weight of the entire world had been lifted off my shoulders and I could finally breathe again. But as the last piece of paper fluttered to the ground, I noticed something strange. The room felt different, the air felt heavier, and there was a low hum vibrating through the walls. I turned to Sarah, confused. "What's happening?" I asked. She looked at me with a strange expression. Was it relief or fear? "You did it. You broke the cycle." Before I could respond, a flash of light exploded around us. The floor beneath us seemed to tremble, and for a moment, everything went still. It felt as though time had stopped, and then, just as quickly as it had started, the light faded. I blinked, disoriented, and looked around. The room was exactly the same, but everything felt different. The air seemed clearer. The weight of the past was gone. It was as though a veil had been lifted, and I was seeing the world with fresh eyes. The world didn't end, and nothing catastrophic happened. In fact, everything seemed ordinary. My apartment, my surroundings, everything was just as it had been. But I knew I had done something monumental. I had broken free from the cycle that had been dictating my life. I turned to Sarah, who was standing across the room, looking at me with a mixture of admiration and sadness. She stepped forward, her eyes locking with mine. "You really did it," she said, her voice a little shaky. "I did," I replied, finally feeling like I had a grip on the situation. "I broke free. I'm in control now." She smiled faintly, but there was something unsettling in her eyes. "You have no idea how hard it was to make you realize that. The cycle is powerful, but now you've changed everything." The weight of her words hit me. I had made the decision to break free, but now that I had, the consequences were still unknown. I didn't know what the future would hold, or what changes would come. But I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The future was wide open. It was mine to shape. So, what do you think? If you were given a chance to break free from the path that's been set for you, would you take it? Or would you choose the comfort of staying where you are? Let me know what you would do in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with others. The future is full of possibilities. Don't let anyone else write your story.